Welcome to your friendly neighborhood historian, where we discuss just enough history to inform, intrigue, and entertain. I'm Bill Petro. The history of America, 250 years. The United States of America celebrates its 250th birthday this year, or at least the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. It should be noted that the Declaration was essentially a bill of divorcement from Great Britain, not a document explaining how these 13 united colonies of America should be governed. However, the form of government that these United States would take was discussed immediately thereafter, in July of 1776. Our experiment with a limited democracy began with the Articles of Confederation, which were debated by the Second Continental Congress at Independence Hall in Philadelphia between July 1776 and November 1777, finalized by that Congress on November 15th, 1777, and then became effective on March 1st, 1781, after ratification by all 13 colonial states. The Constitution of the United States, with its representative republic, was developed in response to several weaknesses in the Articles of Confederation. It was created on September 17th, 1787, ratified on June 21st, 1788, and then became effective on March 4th, 1789. But back to the birthday celebration. 250 years of self-governance. No other country or nation state in history has had a continuous self-government that lasted as long as ours, though that depends on how one defines it. Admittedly, our current form of government goes back to the Constitution in 1789, only 237 years ago. I'm sure we'll have a celebration for its 250th anniversary. But here are some notable examples of other major nation states that one might think were long lasting, but not as long as we think. The Athenian democracy is generally considered to have lasted nearly 2 centuries from its establishment in the late 6th century BC to its suppression by the Macedonians in the 1st century BC. Rome's republic was the period between the overthrow of the monarchy and the rise of the empire. But that period between 509 BC and 27 BC was not a contiguous republic and was marked by near perpetual war, including civil wars. Sometimes a dictator ruled in place of the elected consuls. The Roman Senate was sometimes advisory to the magistrates and the Roman people, but at other times exercised enormous power. At other times, there was either military rule or non-military civilian assembly rule. But it was ultimately the weakness of the Roman Senate and the corruption of the elites that led to the empire's rise. France's republic, since the French Revolution in 1789, has seen a series of monarchies, dictatorships, and between 13 and 15 different constitutions. For other examples, other old republics were not representative democracies in the modern sense that we think of them. San Marino, which is boasted of being founded in 301 AD, was more of an oligarchic city-state run by a council of nobles. Switzerland had republican cantons dating back to medieval times, but they were independent of each other with limited franchise, oligarchic councils, and were not united as a modern federal democratic state until 1848. The Republic of Venice lasted 1,000 years, but it was oligarchic with power concentrated among patrician families and a small elite elected the Doge, or the Duke of Venice. What are the things that are unique to the United States? At its founding, the United States was a genuinely unprecedented political experiment. Several features made it unique, or nearly so, among the nations of the world at that time. First, it had a written, codified constitution. Most nations operate under unwritten constitutional traditions, including Great Britain, or simply under the will of their monarchs. The U.S. Constitution of 1787 was a deliberate, reasoned document that defined the structure of government, enumerated its powers, and placed explicit limits on it. The idea that a people could consciously design their own government from scratch, rather than inheriting it through history and tradition, was radical. Secondly, Republican self government at a continental scale. Republics had existed before, but it was believed that they could only function in small territories where citizens shared common interests and knew their representatives personally. The American founding fathers proposed a vast republic, which most political theorists deemed impossible at the time. James Madison's Federalist Paper number 10 challenged this, arguing that a large republic would be more stable because the multiplicity of factions would prevent any one from dominating. Third, federalism as a structured principle. The Constitution of the United States, with its unique division of sovereignty between the national government and constituent states, was a novel concept. Previous confederacies, like the Dutch Republic and the American Articles of Confederation, lacked a strong central authority and divided power among member states. Monarchies centralized power. The U.S. Constitution's novel solution was to establish two sovereign levels of government, state and federal, each with its own sphere of influence, requiring citizens to be loyal to both simultaneously. This constitutional arrangement was unprecedented in any country. Fourth, separation of powers with checks and balances. While the 18th century French Enlightenment political philosopher Montesquieu had theorized the separation of legislative, executive, and judicial functions, the American system institutionalized this more rigorously than any prior government. It had a bicameral legislature, meaning two houses of Congress, with different constituencies and terms of office. It had a separate elected executive, the president, who wielded veto power, and an independent judiciary, the Supreme Court, with life tenure for the judges. These interlocking mechanisms were designed to prevent the concentration of power in any single branch or faction. Britain had a partial separation, but Parliament remained supreme. Fifth, no monarchy, no aristocracy. In 1788, virtually every significant nation in the world was a monarchy, with hereditary aristocracies holding legal privileges and dominating politics. The U.S., however, lacked a king, titled nobility, and explicitly prohibited titles of nobility. Political legitimacy rested solely on popular consent, not divine right or hereditary succession, a unique feature among functioning states. Sixth, sovereignty located in the people. The theoretical grounding of the American system, that sovereignty resides in the people themselves, who delegate limited authority to their government through a constitution, was a philosophical revolution made into a political reality. Governments everywhere derived legitimacy from tradition, conquest, or divine sanction. For example, Dieu est mon droit, God and my right. That's the motto of the British monarchy. The Declaration of Independence has words like, "We hold these truths" to be self evident. And the Constitution's preamble starts with, "We the people." All of this made popular sovereignty not just a theory, but the operative founding principle. Seventh, religious pluralism and disestablishment. Most European nations in the mid 18th century had an established state church to which citizens owed at least nominal allegiance. Examples include Great Britain with the Anglican Church, Sweden was Lutheran, France was Roman Catholic. But things were different in America. Now, each individual state might have an established church, but that would later change. The First Amendment's prohibition on religious establishment was unusual at the federal level. While the founders were not uniformly secularist, and those who were religious were of different denominations, they created the first major national government constitutionally prohibited from establishing or banning a religion, a significant departure from European practice. This created a free market economy for religion in the United States and the flourishing of religious pluralism. Finally, the broader significance. What made the American founding particularly unique was not just that any one of these features in isolation, but their combination and the fact that they were implemented in a large functioning state rather than remaining theoretical. This is what made the difference. Thinkers across Europe and revolutionaries in France, Latin America, and beyond watched the American experiment closely, precisely because it was testing propositions about human self governance that had never been tried at that scale. Whether the experiment would hold was genuinely uncertain. Many expected it to collapse into monarchy or anarchy within a generation. Indeed, both King George III of England and Napoleon Bonaparte of France are said to have been astounded when the first president of the United States, George Washington, refused to accept the, quote, crown of perpetual presidency and stepped down after 2 terms in office. Here are some personal reflections. Beyond the historical record, my own travels have reinforced this concept. Especially during my career as a technology speaker and trainer, I've traveled to 55 countries over the past 40 years. I've spoken before generals in Beijing, professors in Taiwan, university students in Saudi Arabia. I've conversed with Orthodox rabbis in Israel and businessmen on every continent except Antarctica. Of all the countries I visited and all the people I've spoken with, I came away with this powerful realization. There's nothing like the United States anywhere in the world, not even in terms of lip service. While not everyone I've met has liked the U.S., they admire it as a model of freedom and democracy, and many want to come to the U.S. to live. It's the #1 destination for foreign immigrants. Since 1965, 70 million have come to the United States. Beyond the imperfect precedents of ancient Greece, Rome, and the Dutch and Swiss confederacies, the Founding Fathers had no fully adequate model for a republic on a continental scale. They were guided by the rationalism of the Enlightenment and by their Christian convictions. Thank you for listening. I'm Bill Petro, your friendly neighborhood historian. You can find more details on this topic and others on my website at billpetro.com.